trauma over time can actually turn into physical ailments in the body.
Because when your body doesn't feel safe because of trauma, your system starts deteriorating over time.
The intersection of mitochondrial health, conventional medicine, cellular energy, so much more, nootropics. Where do I even continue to start?
Because magnesium is one of the things that I think most of us need on a regular basis. But Trozy is great as a reset. It's great when you're traveling. Parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest, digest, detoxify, and heal. And the problem is that most of us are living in sympathetic most of the time. Trauma can be a big driver of that, and that could be sort of so deep-seated that you don't even realize.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. Today I'm sitting down with Dr. Scott Sherr. For anyone who's new here, What If It's Possible is a show where we're going to be exploring the ideas of stories, conversations that stretch what we believe about healing, about humanity, about health, relationships, creativity, and the future that we're all here to build. And this episode in particular is extra interesting with Dr. Scott Sherr because he's a board certified internal medicine physician. He's also a health optimization medicine practitioner and a hyperbaric oxygen therapy specialist. And currently he is the chief medical and health education officer at Troscriptions. And his work really is sitting at generally biohacking is sort of the stratosphere that you're in, but it's a lot more than that. Scott, can you kind of give us a little bit more about what you do?
Well, biohacking, as a term came out, I think in the mid 2010s, if that's what you call them. And it was initially a term that was talked about like inserting things in your body and having different things happen because of that. But it was commandeered by the biohacking movement, Dave Asprey and others as a way to kind of talk about how you can alter your biology to optimize your health in various ways. And in principle, it's a really good idea. It's much better than thinking about yourself as just a population of individuals, or you're just a person in a population of individuals that has a potential risk for something. And that's epidemiology, for example, where you get on a medication because you have thousands of people that have took a medication in a trial, and then you might fit those kind of criteria rather than looking at your own data specifically and then deciding if you want to do something or not. So it's kind of the N of one status of things, which is that you're your own biosystem, your own ecosystem, your own something called your holobiont, actually, which is your holoorganism. The idea that you're made up of not just human cells, but fungus, virus, bacteria, your inputs, everything coming in from the air, the water, pollution, everything else that's kind of making you up you. And then you think about that, it's kind of an interesting one where, you're vastly outnumbered, human cells versus other cells that are in you or that make you your meat suit that you're wearing around. So there always the questions, who's in control of who kind of deal. But in the end, biohacking is a little bit of a misdirection for a lot of people, because what happens is that you start chasing the next tool, the next technology, the next practice, like the squirrel, going up one tree, then the next and the next, always looking for the new hot thing, whatever that might be, and forget that there's a foundation that all of it lays upon. And that's something that I've developed in my own practice over the last several years after I met a very interesting and very smart physician named Dr. Ted Achacoso, who is a mentor and a friend of mine now, who taught me something called health optimization medicine, which is something that I practice now in my home here via virtual practice here in Colorado, where I live. And the idea with that is creating a foundation for biohacking, as it were, and looking at foundational biomarkers, looking at optimizing health rather than treating disease. And so I'm a big fan of all the cool biohacking tools, and I have a lot of them, some of them in my closet behind me, others in the room behind this one, others upstairs, others outside. I have all the things. I have a lot of things. I don't have all the things, but I have a lot of things. But in the end, if you're just doing those things without a foundation on how to optimize your health, I think you can get sort of too tantalized by the tools and technologies and forget about the basic and most foundational things there.
Yeah. When I hear about this, most people who are doing this, or especially in this field as a career, it's really a part of a lifestyle, right? And how did you get started in this space? It's clearly something you're passionate about. I can tell that. Was there a defining moment that started all this?
Well, I'm a physician. I'm an internal medicine doc. I trained pretty conventionally in the early 2000s. However, I also grew up the son of a chiropractor before that. And chiropractic is a very out-of-the-box specialty, looking at things in a very unique way, as the body can heal itself if you give it the tools and technologies, but mostly the foundational things to help it heal and to really be as vital as possible. So for me, when I was looking at the world of biohacking and performance, it was kind of an extension of an integration that I was working on since finishing medical school, in figuring out ways to really help people in the most holistic way possible, knowing that the biohacking performance space was on the cutting edge of where things were going. Because when things are in that world, they tend to start there, and then they tend to start growing in other areas where it really helps other people as well. So I started working in the biohacking performance space in the mid 2010s. I created my own integrative practice around the field of hyperbaric oxygen therapy, which is something that I've been around and doing for a long time. And started using it as a fantastic tool and accelerator, as I was also growing my health optimization practice, which is foundational biomarkers, looking at vitamins, minerals, nutrients, and cofactors, the gut health, lifestyle, diet, basic things that are not easy, like eating and drinking well and getting good sleep and having good relationships, getting outside and grounding and getting sunlight. That all sounds easy, but it can be difficult if you're not feeling well, is what it comes down to. So for me, it's been an evolution of my practice over the years. I spent a lot of time in my companies that now support a lot of that work in a more global sense. We have a nonprofit that trains practitioners called Health Optimization Medicine and Practice. A nonprofit is a 7-module certification for practitioners. You don't have to be licensed. If you're not licensed, it's okay. You can come, and if you're a health coach, you can learn it. And that's the beautiful thing about a lot of this medical world now, is a lot of it's becoming decentralized, and as a result, you don't have to be or have to go to somebody in an office to get your care anymore if you find the right people. So we have a nonprofit that helps do that in a really cool way, and we have 7 modules that are really focused on that. And then I have a company that helps with products that can help people right now along their path that can take a while depending on where they are on their optimization path, but things for energy, focus, sleep, stress. And that's a company called Troscriptions. I also have my own clinical practice, which I do here, which I still work with patients. I enjoy that, and I find it's very important. And I also have another company in the hyperbaric space called One Base Health that also helps with the ecosystems of technology. But in the end, I wake up every day. I try to do my practices. I hang out with my 4 kids if they're home. Now there's only two of them are at sleepaway camp at the moment, and hang out with my wife and try to really, try to walk the walk as best I can.
Yeah, I love hearing that, because it's less about trying to optimize just yourself and trying to live longer necessarily, but it sounds like you really started out of service, which is really cool. For most people who are listening and watching, I feel like they're really curious what someone like you, who is like a specialist in the field, like what is your daily practice? What does that look like?
Well, it has changed a lot over the years. I also tell people that you can do what you can with what you got where you are, right? That's the common scenario. So I know a lot of people will go online and watch these people's like beautiful morning routines and like beautiful evening routines, and like they're taking breaks and they're doing all this and that's great, and that's amazing if you can do it. But that's not the reality for a lot of people. And I want to just acknowledge that, and over the years, my morning routine has changed. My evening routine has changed a lot. My biggest thing here is that there is a lot of emphasis on morning routines for people. And I do think it's important, to some degree for sure, to try to start your day in a specific way if you can. But I think the bigger and the more important routine is actually your evening routine for most people. And that's because sleep is kind of the biggest, time we spend in one location for the rest of our lives. And if we get good sleep, the rest of the day, the next day is going to be much better. And we have a saying at our nonprofit, Dr. Ted actually, who came up with this, he says, your day doesn't start when you wake up. It starts when you go to bed. And if you think about it that way, then you start thinking about how important sleep is. And this is something that I didn't believe in for a while. I mean, I was in medical school. My friends and I had shirts that said sleep is for quitters, right? Because, you don't sleep much in medical school, especially certain rotations and things like that. And then I have 4 kids. So you can imagine I wasn't sleeping very much, mostly during my 30s. And so it wasn't until my late 30s and early 40s that I really started to realize that, wow, if I don't sleep well, I don't feel good. Because it took that long, actually. I was able to compensate for a while until I started realizing that I couldn't do it anymore. And so once I started focusing on an evening routine, and sometimes the evening routine is just 15 to 30 minutes. Sometimes it's longer, depending on what I have. I mean, if I'm home, I'm very grateful to have an infrared sauna, so I can use a sauna before I go to bed. I can meditate before I go to bed. I can do some light stretching. I can relax with the kids depending on the day. That's typically my my evening routine. But no matter where I am in the world, 15 minutes before I go to bed, it's the same thing every single time, no matter where I am. And I try to go to bed at the same time as I can, if possible. If I'm home, every single evening, as much as I can when I'm home as well, because that really does help the body know exactly when you're going to go to bed, that kind of thing. So my evening routine can be as short as 15 minutes or even 10 minutes sometimes, or as long as a couple hours. In the morning, it depends, like I have 4 kids, and sometimes, I'm not the early bird. I'm not the one that gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm not that guy. So I usually typically wake up around when they do. So it depends on the day and what's going on, but at least try to have a couple moments in bed before I wake up to try to settle myself and, try to, ground for the day and, send some intentions and something like that. And then throughout the day, I'm usually I'm trying to take breaks from the screen. I'm trying to get some sunlight. Exercising is important. I call it parasympathetic breaks. So trying to take your brain and your mind offline for at least 5 or 10 minutes can be good every couple hours if you can. At least get your eyes off a screen. My eyes get quite tired after looking at a screen for long periods of time. And so that's just something I'm aware of. There's many more things, but I mean, I have my Peloton in the back over there. I have my exercise equipment. I have my sauna. I don't have a cold plunge. Don't have one of those yet. But I try to, do what I can on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, it's so funny because like some of these things that you're recommending, it seems so straightforward of like, this is just like being a human, just do these things, like go to sleep at a regular time, like get plenty of rest. And I think they say like 7 to 9 hours is the recommended time. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, the average American's sleeping around 6 hours a night, which is just not enough. I mean, you're not that person that can get away with that unless you're 1% of the population. And I know a couple of people like that can sleep 4 to 6 hours a night and they're completely rested and they're in their 60s or 70s and they're still alive and don't have heart disease, right? But for the most part, if you do that for long periods of time, your body will start breaking down. Your immune system will start breaking down. Your nervous system will start breaking down and your hormones will start breaking down. Your cardiovascular system, I can keep going, right? And so it's really important, not just the number of hours, but also the efficiency of your sleep. Like your sleep has to go through it's what's called a sleep architecture. So every night you're supposed to go through stages of deep sleep. You're supposed to go through REM sleep. You're supposed to cycle through those and have more deep sleep in the beginning of your evening and have more REM sleep in the end of your evening, right? And so a simple fix that I've had for a lot of my patients is just go to bed an hour earlier. And shockingly, they get another 30 minutes of deep sleep that way. Because again, you get your deep sleep earlier in the evening typically. And so, your doom scrolling and everything else on your phone is not going to be giving you the sleep that you need, I promise. And so it's important just to not to think just about the hours, but also the architecture of it. And then using medications, for example, or even THC to get you to sleep is going to ruin it's getting you to bed, but it's not giving you good sleep architecture. So they are different. You have to be aware of that. And so it's really important to have a really great sleep environment, making sure that you're sleeping in a dark location, a quiet location, or you have a sound machine. If you have a partner in bed and they're snoring, that's not going to go well. You probably have to sleep in a different room or get them a sleep apnea machine if they need it, if you can tolerate that next to you. Sleep divorces it's one of those things where almost 50% of U.S. couples sleep in different rooms, or at least getting a separate set of covers from them is a nice little change so that you're not like fighting for covers in the middle of the night and like getting cold or hot, depending on the day and the time and things like that. So typically one person's sleep divorce is something that almost 50% of U.S. couples are currently doing because it's better to sleep in a room that you're not going to be disturbed in. And couples are realizing that this is not such a bad thing. If you get good sleep, everybody's a nicer person in the morning. So that's just another one, to think about as well. So in the end, the sleep environment really matters. Sleep really is a huge and vital piece, and something that I was not very much excited about when I was younger either, because, we don't get that in the culture. You sleep when you're dead. The hustle never sleeps, that kind of thing. But sleeping will reset you and make you feel better in the morning. So that's why I think an evening routine is almost, I think it is more important than a morning routine.
Yeah, it's funny because I wear earplugs because my partner snores sometimes too, and I snore sometimes too. And it's so important because like if I get woken up in the middle of the night multiple times, the next day I really feel it now as well. Like I'm in my late 30s also. There are a lot of people that talk about using supplements to help offset sleep deprivation, things like creatine supplements or taking supplements before bed to help deepen the sleep. Well, what are your thoughts on these types of supplements though? Are they not worth the hype or?
No, they can all be used depending on the situation. I mean, I know that creatine's been the hot topic these days in a lot of ways, but it's been around forever. It's a really great supplement for most people. Most of us aren't getting enough, and it's great for brain energy. It's great for muscle energy too. It's a good reserve source for adenosine triphosphate, or our energy currency. There have been a couple studies that showed that if you took like a high dose of creatine in the morning after you have a poor night of sleep, that you're going to potentially have less brain fog and better brain function as a result of that. So that's a good thing, at least. When it comes to other supplements as well, like that I use for the evenings, things like magnesium are very well studied. People are pretty magnesium deficient these days. And so I have a lot of people on magnesium at night. Magnesium has lots of different roles in the body. It works on enzymatic pathways. It also decreases your brain's reactivity. It blocks a receptor or decreases the receptor sensitivity called glutamate, which is important, and increasing your GABA system. I'm a big fan of the GABA system for people in the evenings because it can be hard for people to kind of calm down, and GABA is your neurotransmitter that kind of calms down the brain. And so I use a lot of supplementation in people that have a hard time calming their brain down, because if you can't calm your brain down, you can't keep your mind from not being as active, it can be difficult to fall asleep, difficult to stay asleep. And the GABA system is like your brakes of your brain. And so when people think of GABA, they often think of maybe like alcohol or benzos or something, or sleep drugs, because those all do work on the GABA system. But the problem with alcohol is that it's not a very good thing for sleep. It might make you fall asleep, but your rest of your sleep is going to be trash after that. And, the benzos and the alcohol and the sleep drugs of the world, these are addicting over time. And these are things like Ativan, Valium, Ambien, Lunesta, things like that. These are all very addicting because they very much deplete GABA. And as a result of that, you need more of it to get the same result. And you get withdrawal and dependence and intolerance and things like that. So I like natural compounds that work on the GABA system. I like things like kava and CBD and CBG. And I also like another compound called Agrin, specifically that we have in a formula at Troscriptions called Tro-Z. It's got a combination of Agrin plus something called Hanokiol, which Agrin's from the Amanita mushroom, the Amanita muscaria, which is a psychedelic mushroom, but low doses are not psychedelic and very, very good on the GABA receptor, very supportive. Magnolia bark is really great in the GABA system too. And when you think about sleep too, you also want to think about that sleep is not just one signal. It's certainly not just melatonin, right? Melatonin, everybody's like, oh, I'll take melatonin for sleep, but that's just one signal to help you go to bed, but it doesn't help you stay asleep, doesn't have all the other aspects that are required to keep you asleep and get good rest. And so I think melatonin can be good, but it's not the only one. So, in Tro-Z, we have 5-HTP that gives you serotonin. We have a little bit of melatonin. We have something called cordycepin and adenosine, which are both working on what's called the adenosine system on the body. And that adenosine is a neurotransmitter. It has multiple functions, but it's also a neurotransmitter that makes you feel sleepy. It gives you sleep pressure. You have Hanokiol and you have and Agrin, which are working on the GABA system, and CBN and CBD that are working on the endocannabinoid system too. So it's a cool, very comprehensive formula. So I use it a lot in people that are having a hard time getting to bed, and I do find that it worked really well. But the goal over time, Jimmy, is to get people on the least amount of stuff as possible. Once they get their routines settled, for me, when I'm traveling, I take Tro-Z, no problem, and I take magnesium most nights because magnesium is one of the things that I think most of us need on a regular basis. But Tro-Z is great as a reset. It's great when you're traveling. It's great if you're having a hard time falling asleep. But the goal is to find ways to get naturally to sleep as best you can. And that really does start with a good sleep routine. But I'm not averse to supplements. And I think it's an area where I use a ton of them, depending on the person and depending on me, what I'm using, depending on the evening as well. I'm a big fan of this compound called cordycepin from the cordyceps mushroom, which is in Tro-Z, but I also use it separately in another product that we have called Tro-Immune, because this high strength cordycepin increases deep sleep. And cordycepin is from the cordyceps mushroom, by the way, I should say. And it is also an immune system modulator. And so it's great to prevent yourself from getting sick when you travel. So a good combination for me is usually our Tro-Z and our Tro-Immune together as a way to really get your good deep sleep, prevent yourself from getting sick. So it's a big one for me. And I have a lot of patients and a lot of friends that are always asking me about what's the right sleep supplement, for me. And I think everybody's going to be a little bit different, but I like Tro-Z as a good one for most people to try.
Yeah, I feel like all these supplements it's like, in my mind, I personally don't want to be dependent on it,
Sure.
for my life, for the rest of my life, for example. But I feel like there's so many good instances where it's so helpful. But I think on top of that, it's like, what is creating the stress that's not allowing you to sleep at night, for example, like using sleep. And I think going back to some of those root causes can be something that people should look at rather than just only rely on the supplement. But I think a balance of all of it is what's necessary, is like what would make sense in my mind, at least.
Yeah. I mean, I think a big part of this, Jimmy, is that it's really important. And I gave a talk in maybe 2019, I think it was. And I asked everybody in the audience, like, how many people here are taking supplements, right? This is at a biohacking conference. So you can imagine everybody raised their hands. I asked another question though, which is this. I said, how many people here are taking supplements because they measured certain deficiencies or toxicities in their body and are taking supplements that are directed towards that? In 2019, maybe 30% of people raised their hands, right? And if you did the same thing now, if you asked the same group of people if they were taking supplements because they measured it, it would probably be more around maybe 50 or 60%. So definitely better than it was before. Meaning so that, in 2019, it would have been 30% of people that would have said they were checking labs and seeing what they needed. And now in 2026, it might be like 50 or 60. So that's better. But in my estimation, the main thing here is to remember that we should be taking the most of our supplements we should be taking are ones that are based on what we need, not just what we heard about from an influencer, not just we heard about from a friend. It should be like, what are the things that we need depending on our biology? And that's the base for me. That's the base for my patients. And that's about 80% of what I take on a regular basis is what I need because I've measured it and I'm using it and I'm measuring those things over time to see if I still need them or if I need to change it or modulate or whatever it might be. So that's the big difference, is that there's so many supplements you can take. Believe me, I know. I get a lot of them to try all the time. But I always tell my patients, and I always remind myself, it's that your base stuff is the most important, which is what you've measured. And then you're taking what you need depending on what you measured. And so if your magnesium level is low, you need to take magnesium. If it's not low, then don't take it and see how you feel, right? If your antioxidant levels are low, take some antioxidants. If they're not, then don't, right? If your B vitamins are low, then take them, right? Or if they're not, then don't. But in essence, if people can't get their stuff checked, which I know is expensive and takes time and things, there usually are, pretty common deficiencies for most people. That includes things like antioxidants and B vitamins and needing some gut support and things like that. So those are all things that I might empirically recommend somebody to use if they can't get their blood work checked. But in essence, what I'm trying to do for most people is give them a base of supplements to take, and then they can play with those other 20% of supplements that they may not have tested directly. And from there, have a little bit of fun. And that's what I typically do with my patients. That's typically what I do with me. And, I find lots of really interesting things from my patients and they tell me about them, or I'm doing research and my colleagues will tell them about me. So what it comes down to is that, 80% of what you're taking on a regular basis should be based on what you need. And then you can play with the other 20%. And that's what I tell my patients all the time. That's what I do myself.
Yeah. It's, I see that there's like tests that you can take now that will cover 155 biomarkers that you want to find out. I have some friends that are also doing these tests, and surprisingly, people who don't take tests very often, my friends found out they had Lyme disease. Just as an example, I don't want to scare anyone, but there's a lot of stuff that you can find out by taking these regular tests, just so you know what's going on with your body, just so you can measure it, like you're saying.
Yeah, so, just be careful with Lyme disease specifically. That particular test is not very good, and so the standardized testing for Lyme can be scary and not be real. So just be aware of that. So that's why it's really important that there's a lot of these sort of direct to consumer lab companies now that are giving you this opportunity to test all these labs. But if you don't have somebody that can help, you kind of understand how to interpret them, it can be scary, or you can kind of get into, some wormholes you don't need to get into, kind of thing. So you have all these other companies like Function and Superpower and things like that. And I know these people. I know the companies. I know Mark Hyman. I know the guy that runs Superpower as well. I forget his name off the top of my head. It's a good idea in essence, but the challenge is that it's a limited number of markers with an AI readout that you get. You don't talk to somebody. And so you have to be aware of that. So you're not going to get the most robust amount of information. So I always recommend working with a provider if you're going to get laboratory testing done, because just direct to consumer can sometimes give you like some of the information, but not all of it, and then give you information that might not be exactly what you're looking for, or send you down rabbit holes that might not be what you want to do. So just be aware of that.
This is my first time hearing this, and it's blowing my mind that these tests could be false and that they're getting treatment for something they literally
Lyme is
do not
notorious.
have.
Lyme is one of the most notorious because everybody's had Lyme at some point. At least if you grew up on the East Coast, on the Northeast especially, which is where I grew up, you've definitely had Lyme almost 100%, because you were outside, you got ticks, I got ticks, and you're going to have Lyme titers, but that doesn't mean you have Lyme disease, right? And then Lyme is another one of these interesting bugs where it's one of those things like you can have it as a kid and then it stays in your body, but doesn't cause any issues until you have something else that happens. And then your immune system kind of goes haywire. And then all of a sudden the Lyme's like, hey, I'm here kind of deal. But it's not about treating the Lyme per se. It's actually about treating the immune system and optimizing that. So that's a very nuanced one you mentioned. So, but some of the other things are much more straightforward. It's like my B vitamins are high or low, or my vitamin C is high or low. But Lyme is a very, very tricky one. So if you ever get a positive Lyme test from any of these direct-to-consumer companies, go to somebody that can help you interpret that for sure.
Okay, thanks for that tip. I haven't seen these results for myself where I was worried, but I definitely am everyone listening now has this information, and it's amazing because you're busting some of these myths that people just assume when they get a test result that it's accurate.
Yeah, you have to also realize that test results are interesting because when you look at a normal value of a test, do you want to be normal or do you want to be optimal, right? And you have to remember that a lot of these ranges are not set up to be optimal. They're set up to be the ranges where you don't have, significant symptoms of something, right? A good example of this is your thyroid, your TSH, right? Where what they do is to create a normal level of the thyroid, they give you a range from somebody that's 9 years old to 90 years old, and they average out all the thyroid TSH levels of all those people, right? Do you want to have a TSH of somebody that's 85 years old? No. Do you want to have a TSH of somebody that's 20 years old or 25 years old? Probably, right? Because that's when somebody's most optimized in general, like our most optimal time, and some of your listeners might remember this or maybe still be there, between 20 and 30 years of age, right? That's when you're the most resilient. That's when you can wake up without a lot of sleep and still feel okay the next day. That's when, you can get erections without a problem, if you're older, depending what it is, right? And so if you're looking for optimal ranges, they're typically between 21 and 30 years of age or around that time frame. And so be careful, right? Because if you're going to, and this is actually common, Jimmy, where somebody goes to their doctor, they feel terrible. Maybe they have brain fog. Maybe they have fatigue. Maybe they have GI issues, and their labs are all normal, right? And the doctor says, you know what? You're fine. There's nothing wrong with you. This must be all in your head, right? And that's actually because they're looking at laboratory values for somebody that is in the normal range of somebody that might be sick, right? But not somebody that's optimal. And so that's a big deal too. So we see this a lot in integrated practice where people go to conventional doctors and the doctors say, yeah, all your labs are normal. You're fine. And this must be in your head. And that's very often not the case.
Yeah. I want to ask you since you mentioned things being in people's head, there are doctors like Dr. Gabor Mate, for example, who talk a lot about trauma and how trauma over time can actually turn into physical ailments in the body. Yeah. Does your school of study essentially also show the same information when you look at the research, look at the data on your end?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, trauma is a big, big driver of many things, because when your body doesn't feel safe because of trauma, your system starts deteriorating over time. And oftentimes, no matter what you do, if you don't address the elephant in the room, over time, you're just going to start deteriorating further. And this is very common. You have people had trauma as children, don't even realize they had trauma, but their body never feels safe and they never feel good. They have mental health issues, they have energy issues, brain fog issues, GI issues, and they don't know why. Then they go see all the doctors, nothing helps, right? And then all of a sudden they go do a psychedelic experience and find out they had trauma as a kid. And then they're like, wow, okay, this is why my body's been in this fight or flight mode. Because when your body doesn't feel safe, that's what it is. Your body's consistently in what's called your sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight nervous system. You're supposed to have two branches of your nervous system. One is your fight or flight, the one that helps you run away from the proverbial saber-toothed tiger or the bear or whatever. And then you have the other one, which is your parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest, digest, detoxify, and heal. And the problem is that most of us are living in sympathetic most of the time. Trauma can be a big driver of that. And that could be sort of so deep-seated that you don't even realize that you're in sympathetic all the time. It could also be, external stressors from jobs, works, relationships, and, lots of other things as well that can be causing it. But in the end, if you're in sympathetic all the time, by the way, of course, doom scrolling on your phone can also cause sympathetic activation. And so we weren't programmed to be in sympathetic all the time. We were programmed to be back and forth between sympathetic and parasympathetic. And if we're not doing that, if we're staying in the sympathetic system too long, it puts a lot of stress on our body. It puts a lot of stress on our hormones, a lot of stress on our immune system, a lot of stress on our mitochondria, the part of our cells that make energy. And our energy producing parts of our cells, the mitochondria, we need a lot of these to work well. We have actually a huge number of these in the system. We have quadrillions of mitochondria. Quadrillions, that's above trillions for those that are playing at home. It's a lot. And so we have to make sure we support these. And if your system's in sympathetic all the time and you're not making enough energy, your body's going to feel that in all the ways I just described. And so trauma is a big part of it, but it's not the only part, right? Because if you're working on trauma and trying to address it, it's absolutely important, but you also have to you have to sort of address the system at large as well, and making sure you're revving up energy production, improving detoxification, helping the gut, but it's got to be done all together. Like it's got to be done in a sort of in a holistic sequenced way. But certainly trauma and the body keeping the score is a huge part of all this. And no matter what I do, if I work with somebody who has a lot of trauma and I'm not trying to optimize their vitamins, their minerals, their gut, nothing's going to work very much until they address that stuff as well. And that's been my experience over the years, is that if you don't have that other aspect addressed, the big sort of elephant in the room, as I mentioned, there's very little you're going to be able to do physically for patients until that's also being addressed. There's certain things you can do to temporize. There's ways you can try to start down regulating the nervous system, which I do. You can learn breath work, you can learn meditation, you can learn yoga. I can give you supplementation. I can optimize the GABA system. We have, Troz for sleep. I have Trocom for our anxiety stress reduction during the day, which can be helpful, but it's not going to take care of the elephant. The elephant's still there. And so the short answer to your story is that yes, absolutely, trauma is a big part of a lot of people's history, and that absolutely needs to be addressed, but it has to be addressed in a very intentional way, and not, just going down to Peru and doing 5 nights of DMT. That's not usually the only thing that needs to be done, for these people. And that can often significantly destabilize them from an energy perspective because their system's been under such duress for such a long time.
In these cases, you said some things that can temporize and just kind of keep them stable using supplements and stuff like that, and this is what I was talking about earlier about using supplements to calm down the system, because now you're dependent on it, but you're not actually dealing with the thing. And it could be under the surface still something that's kind of taking at your energy. What would you recommend? Yeah.
So, what I usually say here is that there's short-term ways of helping, and then there's medium-term and there's long-term, right? So long-term, addressing the trauma is absolutely essential if that's a big part of it, or addressing the main stressors that are causing the sympathetic activation, say it's work stress, relationship stress, physical stress, whatever it might be. So what you want to do here in the short term, though, is start giving people the experience of calming down their nervous system. But it's important to realize that if you calm somebody's nervous system down before they have enough energy to do it, they can crash. And I've seen this a lot where somebody that's been in sort of hyper stress mode for a long period of time, they start trying to calm down their nervous system, and all of a sudden they lose all of their energy. They start crashing. They feel like they can't move and they can't get off the couch. And because if you start down regulating the nervous system too quickly, you'll find that this system doesn't have enough energy to support a nervous system that's running at a lower intensity, I guess is the best way to say it. And so this is a classic where you give somebody something to calm down and they crash, right? And I've seen this a lot in clinical practice, especially in people that have been sort of high charging for long periods of time. And, I have friends that have, these experiences, and it's rough, right? It can be really rough. And so I always like to work on energy first, Jimmy, and that works. And what I mean by energy first, is working on the mitochondria first and giving some cellular support there. And then after giving some cellular support to make sure the mitochondria are more stabilized, then we start down regulating the nervous system. And that seems to be a really nice sequence for people where they have enough support so that when you start down regulating the nervous system, that they're able to tolerate working and living at a lower intensity level without being so energetically depleted that they can't tolerate it. And that can happen. And I've seen it on many occasions.
So just to clarify, what would you do to help with the mitochondria? Like what would you recommend or prescribe to them?
Yeah. So it depends on the person and kind of where they're at, but usually it starts off with very basic things like trying to work on sleep, right? Trying to work on getting better sleep, trying to get better hydration. Hydration is absolutely key. We need hydration, getting more minerals in the body. So getting more minerals either in hydration or otherwise. Trying to clean up the diet can go a long way as well, and trying to get off, things like alcohol or drugs or processed foods and things like that. But even those things, honestly, can be hard for people. And I've kind of fallen in love with a compound over the last 6 or 7 years called methylene blue, which is not a natural compound. It was made in a lab in the 1870s, and it's been around a long time initially as an anti-infective. But I use it a lot in clinical practice because it's one of the only compounds that I know that can work almost immediately to support somebody's mitochondrial function. I can give them CoQ10, I can give them B vitamins, I can give them vitamin D and melatonin. Melatonin's actually it's also a great antioxidant for the mitochondria. So I can do all those things for sure, but they take time. They don't work immediately and I do all those things all the time with my patients. But if I want to help them now, I found like the biggest lever in my clinical practice over the last couple of years has been using very low doses of this compound called methylene blue, which around anywhere from 8 to 25 milligrams. So not a huge amount of it, but just enough just to give a little bit of support. And what's nice about it, our cells are like gasoline powered cars, Jimmy. We make exhaust. When we make energy, we make our ATP. We make about 150 pounds of ATP every single day. So a huge amount of energy. You recycle that, it doesn't stick around for long. But when we make ATP, we don't just make energy or ATP, we also make water, make carbon dioxide, and that's what goes to the plants and gives them food, and they make oxygen, and the beautiful cycle of life that all of you remember from 8th grade biology class. But we also make what are called reactive oxygen species. These are free radicals. These are reactive molecules that we need in small amounts to help signal the mitochondria how to make energy, but in higher amounts, they cause a lot of stress. And if you don't have enough antioxidants around, which neutralize these, they cause rusting in the system, and the system stops working as well. And there's a lot of other ways that the mitochondria try to protect itself over time if this continues to happen. And one particular path called the cell danger response, which is, sounds dangerous, but it is. It's our mitochondrial's response to stress in general. But leaving that aside, in essence, we make exhaust. And so methylene blue is interesting because it comes in like an electric powered vehicle. It helps the system make more energy, ATP, but it doesn't make any more exhaust in the process. And so as a result of that, you get more of like a clean burning fuel there. And so it kind of supercharges your capacity to make energy when the system's having a difficult time doing that secondary to depletion from the various aspects of having depletion of nutrients and vitamins and antioxidants and things like that have made mitochondrial function less optimal. So in my perfect scenario, what I typically do is I get laboratory testing done on patients. And then from there, I start them on a battery of supplementation, dietary changes, lifestyle changes, things like that. But if I told people, good luck, I'll see you in 3 months or 6 months, because that's how long that stuff takes to work, most people wouldn't work with me, right? So you want to give things that are going to work right now so that they can get across some of those bottlenecks that are very difficult along the way. And then I use something like methylene blue very quickly, very early on after I get some of the testing to start supporting the mitochondrial function now. And then they start feeling better. Their energy is better. Their brain fog is better. Inflammation, pain, just motivation, mood, all those things usually improve. And it's not like you have to wait 30 days or a month or longer than a month to find those benefits. Usually it's within about 3 to 5 days of finding the right dose. And so once I have the methylene blue on board and their energy support system is now better supported, then that's when it's time to start working on the nervous system. Because then the nervous system's ready to come down in intensity, come down in its in its sort of its contracted state and be able to open back up and relax because it has enough energy to do it. I always tell my patients that have anxiety, well, you need more energy to have less anxiety. And if they have bad sleep, I tell them, well, you need to have better energy if you want to sleep better. Right. And it's kind of one of those things where you don't realize that the system is as anxious. The system's not sleeping very well because it doesn't have enough energy oftentimes. And so getting this system more energetically, foundationally supported now while you're doing the harder work of optimizing over the long term is transformative. And then I can give people on the sympathetic side something to down-regulate their sympathetic nervous system. I use the GABA system that I was mentioning earlier, usually something like Trocom or Trozi from my company, or something like L-theanine or CBD, some of the cannabinoids that are non-psychoactive. THC doesn't count here, by the way. And so use all those to kind of help people give the experience of what it feels like to calm down their nervous system, because most people forgot how it feels to be in parasympathetic mode if they've been in that sympathetic the majority of the time. And so giving them the experience of like, oh, this is what it feels like to calm down the nervous system, to how it feels to not be in stress mode. Then we can give them breath work, meditation, yoga, other practices to start working on this without using supplementation over the long term. So that's typically what I do. And then once we've gotten them supported and they're feeling a little bit better, that's when it's time to think about the bigger elephants in the room, which is the trauma work, the external stressors that are causing a challenge to that nervous system and making it be in the fight or flight all the time. Now they're ready. Now they're ready to get out of a bad relationship. Now they're ready to work with trauma. Now they're ready to call their sister that they haven't spoken to in 20 years, whatever it might be. Now they have enough energy to do it. And I think that's the key, is to have enough physical, metabolic, mitochondrial energy to be able to do a lot of the things that we want to do, but we feel like we can't.
What you described sounds like a very clear path where we're blending modern science with like a lot of ancient traditions and ancient wisdom methods like breath work. And
yep,
this is methylene blue is a single dose, and over 3 to 5 days you start seeing results. Is that it, or is it multiple doses?
You take it daily. You take a small dose somewhere about in between 8 and 25 milligrams. And if you don't feel the effects after about 3 days, you increase the dose to your next dose. Usually we have another product at Troscriptions called Just Blue, which is a pure methylene blue troche. Troche is just a dissolvable lozenge. It's kind of our form factor. You can just swallow it though, because troches are typically dissolved in the mouth. But if you dissolve methylene blue in the mouth, your mouth is going to get very, very blue. So mind you that are listening, if you're going to get it and try it, swallow it. Typically on an empty stomach in the morning is the best way to do it. But you start off at a quarter of the dose, which is 4 milligrams. Try that. Doesn't work for 3 to 5 days. Then go to 8, then go to 6, go to 12, then go to 16. Usually by between 12 and 16 milligrams, you start feeling the difference. And I'm not saying you need to take this every day for the rest of your life. I'm saying that you find the right dose that works for you. You keep it on for now, while you're trying to work on the other stuff or work on your diet, your lifestyle, your supplement, your supplements that are more directed toward mitochondrial function over the long term. Then you peel it off over time as you feel better and as you don't need it as much. And that's kind of the goal, right? And I mean, not everybody needs to take methylene blue for sure, but it's just one of those things that I've found that to be super helpful with my patients as they're going through some of the challenges, especially in the beginning of the health optimization journey. If you're pretty well optimized, if you're somebody that's, feeling good most days, feel pretty optimal, sleeps pretty good, and like you don't have a lot of, sort of sympathetic dominance, then you don't need to take it every day for sure. You can just kind of take it. You could take methylene blue as needed, for heavier stress days. It's great for travel, for example, because it can protect you from low oxygen states, because it can work just like oxygen in the cells. So it's a great travel companion. It helps with jet lag. It can help with endurance as well. It actually works just like oxygen in the cells. And so as a result of that, you can go further by, from an endurance perspective and maintain your heart rate up without having to stop. And so I use it a lot in that way too. So not everybody, that's just sort of on their earlier health optimization journey, but the thing about it is as you get more optimized, you need stuff less. That's just how it goes, right? In the beginning, you probably need stuff more just because you need more support. And as you get more optimized, you need less. That's just the nature of things. So
yeah, it makes me sort of giggle a little bit that the fact that the path to their health is just steady diet and health and sleep and all those things. And it sounds like a lot of people walk out the door if they can't get an immediate fix of some kind.
We all want external, internal and immediate gratification, right? It's like, that's just the American way. It's the human way. And we're not programmed, Jimmy, to think about lifespan and longevity. We're programmed to think about what's going to make us survive and feel better now, right? And so that's what we're programmed to do, is to survive and reproduce. And so that's what our brains will focus on, especially if we're not feeling good, right? If you're not feeling good, then you just want to feel better. Like, it's all you want to do, right? If you, injure your back, which I've done many times, and you walk around and see everybody running, I'm like, why me? Why is it my back? Right. And that's the nature of the human existence, which is that we want to survive, or we want to reproduce, or we want to do both, right? Survival is reproduction is survival, right? But in general, that's what we're trying to do. And so if we're injured, we're trying to protect ourselves. We're trying to, withdraw from people and keep away. And, we get depressed. Why? Because depression is an evolutionary mechanism for keeping us safe and away from other people so that we can heal, right? And so this is why people, if you injure yourself and you feel depressed, that's natural, because that's what your body was and your brain was trying to do, is to protect yourself so you wouldn't get more injured, right? So you have to remember that evolutionarily, we're set up in ways to try to survive and try to reproduce. And as a result of understanding that, then you can start reprogramming how your mind works, or just listen to certain thoughts and not others, right? Of how that's all running. And, it's funny because I like to quote, there's a couple different estimates of this, but what I think is probably most accurate is that we have on average about 70,000 thoughts every single day for most people. If you're type A especially, right? Maybe if you're one of those cool type B people that I meet every once in a while, maybe you're less than that. But like, if you can imagine 70,000 thoughts every day, if you believed all of those thoughts, right? Should you believe any of those thoughts, right? And so most of those thoughts are related to survival and reproduction. And if you're depressed or if you're anxious, you're going to have a lot more of those kinds of thoughts too, right? And you're actually going to be even higher, up to like 120,000 thoughts per day when you're depressed and anxious. So just be aware of that. Like, your mind is not here to keep you having a happy and healthy life. It's here to help you survive and reproduce. And when you remember that, you can start reframing your mind and retraining it, which is what we can do with mindfulness, meditation, and things like that.
Yeah, it's ironic that the thing that kept us alive for so long, which is like our intelligent mind, is now the thing that's creating us so much duress and stuff now. With what you're doing in health optimization, do you see this as like down the line, people won't really be needing to save as much money for health concerns because now they've optimized their health at a younger age and prevented so many ailments that could happen later on? Is this going to like change the healthcare system? Like, what do you see in the future?
Well, I would love that to be the case. I love for us to be more proactive instead of reactive. Because if you're feeling good or having no problems at the moment, it's difficult for you to get to the doctor or get the laboratory testing done. Although more people are doing that now, which is good. I think in the future, I would love that. I would love there to be more of an emphasis on optimizing health rather than focusing on treating disease or early onset disease or root causes of them. It's optimal to prevent something to happen before it happens, right? And so in my practice, I do see that. I do see that there's a trajectory change in people if you can get them early enough, or even if they have medical conditions, you can see a trajectory even in those and how they potentially would evolve over time if you hadn't intervened when you did. So I like to say that it's never too late as well. Even if you have medical conditions, if you feel like things are not going well, there's always things you can do to optimize your health. If you're still alive, there's still more you can do, kind of deal, right? But in a perfect world, we'd have a separate system that wasn't a disease care system. We had a healthcare system truly that was focused on keeping people healthy and optimizing their health, keeping them vital. In our world, health optimization medicine, we try to optimize everybody between 21 and 30 years of age, especially with hormones, but also with nutrients and gut and optimizing vitamins and minerals and things. And so when you do that, you find that you can reverse a lot of those things that people start creeping up in their 30s and 40s that they don't start realizing. And then when you start optimizing all those things, and all of a sudden things feel better. You can't stop aging. You're not going to stop that, but you can slow down the progression of these things. Having brain fog is not normal, no matter how old you are, right? Having chronic fatigue is not normal, no matter how old you are, right? And so these are things that as we get older, it's just common to say, oh, my mind, I'm just a little more tired, a little more achy or whatever, right? And like, this is just, getting old, right? And so I don't really believe in that anymore. I think there's a lot we can do to at least slow the path of aging and significantly optimize our health. Yeah.
Honestly, Scott, you're hitting the nail right on the head, because the whole point of this show is to really question things that we think are so normalized of, oh yeah, now my body's just getting achy. Oh yeah, everyone's got brain fog. Oh yeah, everyone overthinks. This is normal. But what if it's not? What if all of those things are just things that we've conditioned for so long to feel is normal all around us because everyone's doing it? And there's actually a better life that we could live, a better way, like to think less, to not be achy, to live past 100 years old, maybe not to like 1,000 years old, but like at least past 100 years old. Like there's people living in blue zones right now that found really simple ways to like, okay, let's not be a stress. Let's take care of this thing. Let's eat a whole meal and, not put a lot of garbage into our systems, things like that. So it's,
what I talk about a lot, Jimmy, just to kind of add on to that, is something called morbidity compression, which is a fancy term for living as long as you can, as healthy as you can, and then dying as quickly as possible. So that's really the goal for most of us, is that we have as many vital years here on the planet that we can. Right now, there hasn't been any major breakthroughs that people are going to live longer than they are now. That might change. That might definitely change, where you're changing out organs or whatever in a couple of years. But right now, the best thing that we can do is to live as healthily as we can for as long as we can, because people are living longer in general, but they're living with more issues, right? More morbidity, more complaints, more challenges. And so the goal for a practice like mine and the nonprofit that we run, Health Optimization in Practice, is to create as long of a health span as possible. Longevity will come if health span is the focus. Now, longer than 100, 120 years of age, that's not possible right now, but maybe in 10, 15, 30 years, I don't know, maybe that is going to be possible. But for now, we still want to live as healthy as we can for as long as we can. That's the deal.
Yeah, because I see people, like younger people, they're drinking less, according to statistics right now, because they learn from later generations. Like maybe they'll live a little bit longer, maybe because of that. I don't know for sure. But imagine if people were actually at an earlier age, actually optimizing their health very early on with this information, all this data that you have. Like I can only imagine what that outcome would look like. It could be very amazing.
I think it will be. I think once the data becomes more robust and really understand how to do it, we're all going to have the capacity to measure a lot of things all the time and be able to tweak and change and do all that. So that's all going to happen. I think it's just a matter of time, and then the matter of the economics of it. And who gets access to things and who doesn't. And that's always going to be interesting too. So
yeah, hopefully it's available for everyone, but you never know.
That's not necessarily how it's going to go, right? But in general, things are usually to the higher echelons, the higher socioeconomic status first. Then usually from there, things will get more, sort of down from there. But that's the biggest challenge that I see, is that there's going to be a lot of discrepancy between what's available between people who have a ton of money and people that don't have a lot. And that's going to be a big challenge going forward, especially with some of these newer technologies. So we're going to have to be aware of that. But you would say that AI is sort of democratizing it in some ways, but AI is going to change as well, because of compute costs and the things like that are going to happen over time. So let's see how it all goes. I'm not 100% optimistic. I'm not 100% skeptical. I'm someplace in between.
Got that. I think it's a safe bet, a safe way to be. Thank you so much, Scott. This has been an amazing conversation. You've literally, I feel enlightened after talking to you. Where can more people hear more about what you have going on, more information about your products? Where are you online? Where can they find you?
Well, thanks for having me, Jimmy. So you can find me at my website. That's probably the easiest place. That's where all my things are. So it's my name, Dr. Scott Sherr, DrScottSherr.com. That's where I have my clinical practice, health optimization practice. I do a lot of hyperbaric consulting as well. I've been around in that field a long time. You can find links there, or you can go direct to my company called Troscriptions. It's a company that's been around for about 7 years that makes products that help with energy, focus, sleep, stress, immune system function, etc. And you can find us at Troscriptions.com. Talked about our Tro-Z and our Trocom today, specifically for the GABA side. Also talked about our Just Blue for methylene blue if you want to try it. Be careful, your methylene blue sourcing, everybody. Be careful. Amazon, we tested them all. They're all bad. So please be aware of that. And so I would get it from us if you want to give it a try. It's called Just Blue. And then our nonprofit is Health Optimization Medicine and Practice, also known as Home Hope. And you can check it out at homehope.org.
That's what this show is really all about. It's really about having these conversations about how we can live longer, happier lives, and how that affects the people that we connect with. When we're feeling healthier and happier, how does that affect how we relate with other people? And how does that affect the world at large? Imagine what that world could look like. So if this episode was interesting to you, I invite you to feel free to share it with anyone within your community, like and follow and subscribe, and definitely follow Dr. Scott to make sure that you keep up with all this breakthrough information about longevity and biohacking and health. And looking forward to seeing you in the next episode. Thanks, everyone.